Hi, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. We got a copy of your book that everyone is going to get today. And at the back of the book, it's got here, Chris Hoy in numbers. Are your thighs really 27 inches in circumference? That's 4 inches more than Victoria Beckham's waist.
Yeah, apparently so. I can't vouch for Victoria Beckham's waist, but yes, my thighs are 27 inches in diameter.
And that is what enables you to power to 44 miles an hour in less than 10 seconds. Just imagine that for a moment. And at the age of 13, you were writing in your diary and you predicted something quite extraordinary. What was it that you predicted?
Well, I was a member of a local cycling club, and the guy who was in charge of the cycling group, and he was our coach at that time, a guy called Ray Harris, he took us aside, and there's about 6 or 7 of us in this group, and we were all between the ages of about 13 and 16. And he said, right, I want you to write down your goals. I want you to write down your long-term goals, your medium-term goals, your short-term goals. And your long-term goal should be your lifelong ambition. It should be your ultimate desire, what you want to achieve in the sport. And bearing in mind, we were just still, very much new to the sport, just doing it for fun. But he said it's important to do this as an exercise. And he didn't really explain why at the time. But for me, I wrote down to be Olympic champion. And I sort of worked out roughly what I thought my optimal age would be. 28 was my prediction. Hopefully that's not true. And so I said 2004, Olympic gold medalist. And, Scottish champion, Commonwealth champion, all the different sort of stages towards that in the short and medium term goals. And I wasn't even the best writer in this group at that time. And I remember when we all sort of sat down and read out what we'd written down, I got the mickey taken out of me for writing down Olympic champion, because other guys had written to be selected for Scotland for the Commonwealth Games, or to win a medal at the Commonwealth Games, or even to win a medal at the Olympic Games. But nobody else had put a gold medal. And my point was, well, okay, I'm not the best in this group. There's other guys around that can beat me, but why limit your ambition, your dream, to being top 3 or to be a representative? Why not aim to be the very best? Sometimes you can look at a goal and it just seems insurmountable. You look at the Olympic Games in London, for example. You finish the Games in Beijing and you see the 4 years between where you are and where you want to get to. And you think, right, okay, there's so many things you've got to do between then, or that moment, and the Olympic Games. And if you just keep focusing on the goal, it can be daunting, and it can really, at times of the year when you're in certain phases of training, your form is suppressed just because you're fatigued, you're working hard. So you get up in the morning, you're aching, your body's aching, you're not going to be your best, but you've got to go through the training. And you could do a time in training that is, miles off where you want to be on the big day. And if you keep referring yourself back to that big day and thinking, I'm so far off where I want to be, it can be really demoralizing. So for me personally, I'd just like to have a plan, have an exact plan of where I want to be, and then break it down into steps. So if I want to be here by 2012, then by 2011 I want to be here, working back to where I am at the moment. So if you have a sound plan, if you have it's got to be a plan that you're happy with, and that you're not just plucking it out of the air. You do have support staff, and you've got a crew of coaches and physiologists, everybody to help you design this program. But once you have this program, this blueprint for success, essentially, you only have to think about that day in front of you, or even not even the day, but the first session of the day. And within that session, just that first effort, you really break it down onto a very micro scale.
Now, many of us will be sat here thinking that you really are some sort of Superman. We think that athletes are the most extraordinary humans. But what you say is that many athletes are among the most insecure people around. And why is that?
Well, I think that, maybe it's a generalization, but certainly, you watch an Olympic Games, or you watch any sporting event, a major sporting event, and you see the athletes walk out to the start, or onto the court, or onto the pitch, or whatever it is they're doing. And you think, wow, they must be supremely confident. They look like they know what they're doing. They've done it thousands of times before. They must be supremely confident. But for me, I think it's almost the self-doubt that pushes me on, and that I don't always know I'm going to do it. And I think if I enjoyed always knowing and having that certainty, that it might not push me on to try and improve each level. I might have stayed at being Scottish champion, or just racing local events, because you're going to win them. There's no kind of fear, or you're not being pushed outside your comfort zone. You're always doing the same thing. And a lot of people like doing that. They like racing events. They know they can win, when really, if they push themselves, they could make that step up to the next level. Imagine yourself on the bike and on the start line, and go through the whole procedure from the moment you step on the bike, you strap your feet on the pedals, the countdown, your breathing, focus, you start the race, and then break the race down, every single part of that race, visualize it exactly as you want it to go, so that you have this perfect race in your head, and you go into complete detail in your head, so you're really trying to think about every single possible thing that you can recall from how the race you've raced in the past and how you want to race in the night. So basically, I just visualized this perfect race over and over again. And I must have done it hundreds of times in that 2-week period between speaking to Steve and actually racing in Athens. And as the days got closer, it was amazing how many more times I was visualizing this perfect race over and over again. And on the night, it was just really strange because, you know, the race itself was under the most incredible pressure, you know, situation. It couldn't have been more pressurized. And although I was aware of the times, I was, you know, if you'd asked me what time has Shane Kelly just done, I could tell you he's done a 1:01, but it wasn't registering fear in me. It wasn't registering any kind of panic. I was just, right, well, you know, I'm still focused. I'm still thinking about my race. And every time I went and looked at the scoreboard and the next rider went up and set an even faster time, I was back in the start gate in my head, going through each step of the race. And then when it came to my turn, even down to the very fact that when they they lock your bike in the start gate, it's a mechanism, and then the clock should start with 50 seconds to go once you put your leg over the bike. But the clock actually started when my bike was locked into the gate. So I'm still sitting in a chair like this at the side of the track. And I was just sitting there, and in this crowd of thousands of people, I heard my teammate Jason Quealy, who was the previous Olympic champion in that event, I heard his voice shout, "Chris, the clock started." And it came through the noise, and I looked over, and the clock was already at 35 seconds to go. So I'd already missed 15 seconds of this time that you normally have plenty of time to compose yourself, prepare on the gate, you strap your feet in the pedals, take a few breaths on the bars, and go. So I pretty much ran onto the track. And this is a situation that would normally cause, you know, a bit of an anxiety or adrenaline rush, because you're thinking, you know, this isn't normal, this isn't how it should be. And they didn't stop the clock, so I had to keep going. So I sort of ran onto the bike, straight on, strapped in. I had about 5 seconds to compose myself, and then away I went. And normally, you know, but it didn't panic me because I was so in such a calm state. And the race itself was bizarre, because it was so like the visualization that I'd expected or I'd hoped for. When I crossed the line, first of all, I hadn't visualized what I would do after I crossed the line. So I put my hand up in the air, but I was just in this stunned state. I was riding around thinking, this is the most, you know, bizarre feeling. Is this real? It was so similar to what I hoped would happen that for us, literally 2 or 3 seconds, I was thinking, is this real?
Will you please join me in giving a huge thank you to Sir Chris Hoy.
Thank you.